Hello, DEC Young Leaders. Happy Wednesday. I'm Steve Gregorian, President, CEO of the Detroit Economic Club, and it's really good to see you today. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. I want to take a brief moment to thank the terrific DEC sponsors for their continued support of our mission, and you're seeing those companies on your screen. I also want to thank you for continuing to support the DEC with your membership. We're busy the next few weeks, so be sure to get your tickets for some upcoming events. Tomorrow, it's our annual meeting with the Detroit Tigers, and we'll be joined by General Manager Al Avila and new manager AJ Hinch. Our moderator will be everybody's favorite Detroit Tiger radio voice, Dan Dickerson. And in June, we host the Mayo Clinic CEO, and you may have seen last week, we just announced we will be also hosting the Big Ten Commissioner, Kevin Warren. Plenty of other events in between. We hope you can join us. But today, we'll spend time together where, like all of our Young Leader CEO meetings, we'll learn from a successful executive and grow our DEC member networks. Hope you can stick around at the end for some networking. We do want to see your smiling faces, so have your video on and your mic's muted. If you've got a question, just use the chat box. Let us know you've got a question. I'll call on you during our final portion of today's meeting. You do not have to type the question out. Just say, hey, Steve, got a question, and we'll call on you in order. So let's begin. Our special guest today is my good friend, Rich Homberg, who's the president and CEO of Detroit Public TV. Rich has spent the last 13 years building Detroit Public TV and WRCJ Radio into a really strong local, statewide, and national leadership position. Rich has worked in commercial radio and TV prior to DPTV, spent 12 years overseeing WWJ News Radio 950, and was part of the team that launched WXYT's move into sports radio. His most important work, of course, is a highly valued board member of the DEC. And Rich and I probably went back, I don't know, about 20 years or so ago.
Yep,
Both our kids were in Little League Baseball, and what I love about Rich, we've got frequent coffee meetings, and I love bouncing ideas off of Rich and just listening to his innovation ideas. And no surprise, as you'll see and learn, Rich and his team are doing some really groundbreaking things at DPTV. He's been so supportive of me personally in my role as CEO, and I can never thank him enough. So Rich, really good to see you today, and thank you for being with us.
Thrilled to be here, and honestly, always impressed with all that you've done, and the DEC and the Young Leaders Group seems particularly impressive. Great, and great to see all your faces.
They are for sure. But before we get started, I want to remind you how time flies. You hosted our Young Leaders in December 2014, almost 7 years ago, and I don't think you've changed a bit. Let's take a look at from 7 years back at Rich Homberg, a la 2014. You're looking really good, buddy.
All of a sudden you wake up and you have your 65th birthday. It's even hard to say. Just it's like it can't be true. I'm 35. I really am. Life moves along. That's for sure.
Well, you look great. So the topic you chose today, Rich, managing and career building in changing times. So let's get started with the changing times, and certainly your industry has seen massive change. So you and I talked, and you had an interesting observation about your days in radio when you were a franchise operator, and how now in the media business, you've got to be an innovator. So let's start there, talk about that.
Sure. Well, obviously the media business has changed monumentally. You're seeing it every day as you try to figure out, do you do Disney plus Paramount and HBO, and right, it's all changing. You get in your car today and you've got radio stations, but you've also got all the other platforms and maybe your favorite podcast. So the business has changed quite a bit. You know, the media business, I joke, we thought we were really innovative. I've been doing this since 1979. Actually, I was doing gopher work in 1976 at the Bicentennial on Independence Mall on July 4th, 1976. I had the side hustle when I was in college of being a gopher for national productions. And we all thought we were innovators and we were geniuses and we're journalists and I'm driving into the company. And the truth is, looking back on it, the media business was a really good franchise. I operated the McDonald's of a franchise of radio called All News Radio. So I was in the all news business for a long time. And of course, we thought we were incredibly innovative. We were. but news, traffic, sports, weather, business, pretty well codified. Truth is, you got to get the traffic right, you got to get the weather right. Traffic and weather together on the 8s is a pretty good formula. I'm not sure it's as good as that breakfast sandwich at McDonald's, but over time, it was a very tricked out business. And that was what was good about it. It felt innovative, but there was a market for employees. There was a market. I could tell you in great detail how you figured out if a market could handle 2 country radio stations. There was math against all this in much the same way you would have in a franchise. The good news is made a lot of money. The margins in the media business were extraordinary. And eventually what you built was a staff that was franchise driven. So picture that McDonald's comparable. Anybody that wants to change the McDonald's menu quickly finds out they shouldn't work at a local McDonald's. That's not a shot. It's just the way they do business. And so in any business, as you scale, you're looking to codify jobs, right? And turn it into a system. And that's good. The further you go down that track, the harder it is. All the innovators, along the way leave. So I was always a little interested beyond the franchise. I started a newsletter business at WWJ that was very successful. We did a bunch of things. And I thought, because of Detroit, we had a ton of business coverage. And I got a new boss along the way, Don Balukas, a great guy. And he's looking at all that we're doing. And he's like, why are you doing this? Just sell the spots, Rich. Just because that was in the radio business, it was sell the spots, play the top 40 hits of your music, and bring great energy to them, but sell the spots. And any salesperson who had a new idea, you'd be like, go back to selling the spots, because it was a market. And so as that changed and the things that used to work don't work anymore, you look around and the people who are the innovator types, they've all left. And so when I was at CBS Radio, we would hire what they called the NTR specialist. This was the non-traditional revenue specialist. This was someone who was going to come in and going to go sell our website. This is 13 years ago. About every 6 months, that person either got fired or left on their own because it was so frustrating in a franchise world to try to innovate. And so big changes. And coming here, almost the opposite of, we really needed to embrace innovation and where we needed to be as an organization and really dig deeply into the opportunities that were presented for a public media outlet. And it's actually been very good for our organization. And we're coming off the most successful year in history, not just because of the pandemic at all, but a decade's worth of trying to figure out what the role we need to play in Detroit.
Yeah, so you're not only surviving, you're really thriving because of your innovative approach.
Right.
So how does public TV and radio thrive during this area that's seeing this transformation?
Right. Well, keep in mind, we're a nonprofit. This is a silly notion, right? We're a nonprofit television station. We're the only nonprofit television station in town. We're the only community licensed station in the state. And we were built to do the things the other guys don't do. Right. So literally, who's going to put classical music back on the air in Detroit? We are. That's the expectation. Right. Who should be driving the conversations with communities? Right now, in the middle of some work with Black churches, with the AAP, the Asian American community. Who should be doing that? Inevitably, I'm in a meeting and somebody says, public television ought to be doing this. So we're in the ought to be business. And so we have to be good at doing the things the other guys don't do. So when I got to the station, I was here about a year and I went to the board and I said, we're not ready for a strategic plan, but I'm pretty sure one thing. We need to stop thinking about shows. Shows are important. Shows are critical. We need to start thinking about issues and we need to start thinking about engagements. And I think there are 5 issues that we need to concentrate on: kids, culture, leadership, energy, environment, and health. And I would always say it that fast because Angela Brown's on the call. She's one of our staffers.
Honest, yes.
She's heard me say this. I wanted to say it fast because I wanted Angela to go, what did he say? Kids, culture, leadership, energy, environment, and health. Children, education, arts and culture, leadership and public affairs, energy, environment, and health. Understand where's the need in the community. You don't need us to tell you where to get your hip replaced. You might need us to think how the community needs to understand resources and mental health. You don't need us to do Dancing with the Stars. Pretty good versions of that. Last night, there was they're headed for the Voice finals. you probably do need us to find a way to support the Detroit Symphony Orchestra or the Jazz Festival. So we need to think about where's the need, who are our partners, dig deeply into this, dig particularly deeply in diverse communities, because almost every challenge in a community is going to be tougher for diverse communities, and dig deeply into that and then find a path forward. And 10 years later, we have 4 thriving pillars. Children education just launched the Michigan Learning Channel. You're about to hear some big noise from us in arts and culture, stronger and stronger in public affairs and news. And we now have about 20 stations across the Great Lakes carrying our coverage of the Great Lakes, a program and a news operation called Great Lakes Now. So how do you dig into where you need to be? And that's what we've been at. And ironically, if you said you need to be ready for a pandemic in 2020, the timing was actually very good in that we were just at that point where we could emerge in education the way we have. And so
you're a strategic leader, and it shows in everything you've done there. So let's switch gears. I want to talk careers with the folks on the Zoom today. So I know you well enough, Rich. I know that nurturing your people and your organization's culture is really, really paramount to you. So tell us about that. Tell us how that's changed, though, during the pandemic.
So Steve and I had coffee last week, and he says, "What do you think about with your staff?" And I said, "Gratitude." And I hope Angela, please nod your head, Angela. But to me, right now, it all starts with how are you and thanks, and how can we figure this out together? I've never believed personally that I was ever at my capacity. And most times I always thought, you can get more out of the situation. And I think in this moment, over the past year, we've said to folks, no email this weekend. And we've given folks some extra time off, and we're trying to be considerate. And we're trying to look at them and say, it feels like you're overloaded. Give yourself a break. And so that's my particular concern. How do we think about bringing people back to the building? But I do think, like, my wife and I have been married 35 years. We're empty nesters. So we have a pretty good income. It's just the two of us. Our parents are all gone. We're pretty independent. And it's even more important than ever to slow down and try to understand how some of the lives other employees are leading, because the pandemic, if you're every challenge has only been magnified, if you will, by the pandemic. And so thinking a lot about that, but then the larger piece of how do we build a strong staff and maintain a strong staff, something we think a lot about as far as staff development and training. We have, for the first time since I've been here, we really have a very strong HR leader. And when I first got here, we had the benefits person, if you will. She was wonderful. And then we had the job description person. And then Tracy Judah joined us, and she's really become an important part of the senior team. I also have a great CFO, and our head of HR reports up through the CFO, and trying to really think it through. How's that really going to impact the employees? And how do we help people better understand their jobs? And how do we get the right kinds of training? The nature of what we do, it's all going to come down to people. One of the oddities of our business, the career tracks in media have been blown up in many ways. That idea of, there used to be, well, I'm going to, you start in Lansing and then you come to Detroit, and if you want to go to New York, you go to New York. Back in the day, if you were running an oldie station and your PD quit, your program director quit, you'd call Columbus, Dayton, Cleveland, and you'd steal somebody from a smaller market. Yes. We very rarely hire from another public media outlet. Almost everybody on our team comes to us from a different career or comes to us as an intern. Our head of operations started here as an intern. So how do you help folks develop when they haven't had the variety of jobs and when we're not exactly sure where all the jobs are going? So thinking a lot about staff development, training.
Let's dig into that a little bit. So you and I talked over coffee, and you had some very definitive ideas on careers versus career paths and how folks on this call can take control.
Okay. Well, candidly, I think one, you need to think about how much career you want. I work about 60 hours a week, and my wife is good with that. How much of this do you want? And there are people I work with who said, Rich, this job does not define my life. I think you do need to think about how much career you want, and that's a real decision. And then, I joke with people, if you want my job, work 60 hours a week, 40 for them and 20 for you. And sort of get up early and think about how you're going to train yourself. I will tell you, my time at CBS was a very tough company. I had a ball there, it was very competitive. But if you needed training, CBS, basically their position was go find it, or you're going to get left behind. I think you do have to own your career in a larger way than ever. How do you find yourself on, sort of on the cutting edge? How do you train yourself? Yes, a smart company helps you with that. But inevitably, there's a big part of this that's just owning your career. And we're talking about, I get up real early because it gives me a chance to have 2-3 hours of just kind of figuring it out and learning myself and reaching out. And Steve will tell you about my, always make the call, ask questions and try and figure it out. I will tell you, I say this with great respect, it's rare, but it's almost always a great opportunity when an employee walks in and says, I'm thinking about a problem the company has, and I have a solution. Or I've been thinking about an opportunity that's a remarkable moment. I had left, I worked for Westinghouse. I left Westinghouse and I was running a traffic news weather service in New York City. And I had an idea for the guy who was running CBS radio. And I called Dan Mason, who I still know to this day. And I said, I have an idea for how, this was when 10-second advertising was not a thing, but it was starting to be a thing. And I wrote a plan for Dan Mason called the CBS 10s Network. And I called the president of the division. And I said, I have an idea for you, and I'd like to send you a document. I was 37 years old. And I'd like to send you a document and go over it. And I sent him a presentation, how if I could get 3 spots an hour on every one of their stations, and I thought you could create a network. And he read the presentation and he said, I can't do this. And it was a big idea, and he might have done it within his own company, but he wasn't going to hire me to do it. But I'd like to talk to you about a job. And that, in part, is how I ended up in Detroit. And so by walking into the head of it, you have to be worth their time. You can call almost anybody. People are honored when you ask for help. Jeff DeGraff, a professor at the Ross Business School, said, people will help you for free, Rich, but you have to be worth their time. And so when you call Steve Gregorian and you say, I'm thinking about starting, I'm in Kansas City, and I'm thinking about starting a young leaders group in Kansas City. Can you help? Well, first of all, Steve's honored. He's like, well, yes. Can I help? I'm Steve Gregorian, right? And they quickly know, are you worth the time? Inevitably, if the right person's calling, you're going to learn something from them too. So, I have these 5 rules. The number 4 rule is always make the call. And so here's a secret. Don't tell anybody. If you read an article in Cranes tomorrow, and you're really impressed with someone, call either the writer or call the subject of the article and say, I read this article in Cranes and I was fascinated. Really? You were? Inevitably, nobody else makes that call. And so one of my secrets of life is always make the call, because it's always worth it.
That's great. One last question before we turn it over to the audience. And just a reminder, folks, go ahead and if you've got a question for Rich, throw it in the chat box. Just say, I've got a question, and we'll call on you next. I want to get your thoughts as companies are getting back to the office, this work from home stuff. Right. How do you plan at this point to manage your organization's work from home going forward? Right.
I'm going to steal your best thinking, Steve. First of all, a lot of thinking and benchmarking. I think incubating in our building, and this won't be a decision. It won't be my decision alone. Tracy Duda, head of HR, will be the face and voice of it. It will be vetted with the staff. It'll be vetted with our board. But I guess at this point, we told the employees that we weren't coming back till July 1st. Angela, don't tell anybody what I'm saying. But I think what we're headed towards, I think, is laying out sort of a track. We're going to take a couple of months to figure this out together. Give us your thoughts. We think face-to-face, your safety is critical, and feeling safe is critical. Help us understand your challenges. We highly value face-to-face, but we do realize the world has changed. And I think we'll incrementally add to, think of that as sort of a filter of, you've got to be safe, you've got to feel safe. We know the world has changed. In the end, at some point, you're also going to say to employees, it has to be our call because we have to run the business. But we also don't want to lose great employees. And I don't think it'll be the same for every employee. And so it's tricky. But for sure, it won't be my thinking. It'll be something the entire team plays into, and we'll vet it significantly. And inevitably, somebody else is working on the problem too, and be open to looking at theirs.
Yeah. Our young leaders might have stage fright today. They're not asking questions. So
Justin Remington's going to ask a question. I just
come
know.
on, Justin, let's go. But so here's one while Justin's coming up with this question. And you and I talked to, and you mentioned Tracy, your HR person. For those on the call that have HR people, how can HR folks help manage young people's careers?
Right. I think what in my head and where I think we're headed, imagine two tracks. Your supervisor is your supervisor. Imagine having a second track to get guidance, not a court of appeals, if you will, but guidance. If our head of HR and we have two HR leaders are there to sort of give you a second voice, a second way to think about it, kind of nuances that or understand, or someone you can, how do I position this? A second set of eyes, if you will. And Tracy's very careful. You don't want your managers to be at odds with each other. And we have a joke about sort of how you vet that discussion. But I think it's so invaluable to think there's someplace I can go to think it through, who works for the company, but also is interested in my progress.
Yeah, good. All right, we stirred up a couple of questions, so let's ask Justin to unmute, and then Nico, we're going to come to you next. So Justin, the floor.
Hey, Rich, it's good to see you. I'm now the third of the team you've been speaking with today.
Right.
But I'm curious because one of the things that since we've met many years ago, I've always been really impressed by your energy and the vision and thoughts that you have. And I think during this pandemic, many of us on this call, but me specifically, have just been pushed to the brink of, as you try to go through and you try to have this energy and you try to be innovative and you try to keep all of these things going, whether you're a type A or you're a shy person, how do you go through and try to keep that energy level up to keep your team inspired? And I loved what you said about giving time off, because I think sometimes, at least in the consulting business, we want to give what is best for our clients, but we are also people too.
Right. I think knowing yourself is key. When I turned 50, as I mentioned earlier, my wife and I played golf together forever. We're not great golfers. We just have fun playing. My wife said, do you want to go to Pebble Beach for your 50th birthday? I said, no, I'm going to hire myself a coach. And I paid for my own coach. And you're 50, right? There are a ton of systems out there that, if you've seen Enneagrams or Myers-Briggs, or there's a bunch of ways, tests you can take. But I think you have to really understand yourself and your rhythm and what you want, right? Not every important person's a big mouth. At the same time, by the way, the coach did a 360. The coach comes to me and she says two things and this is where you get gratitude as well. She said, do you know there are meetings you need to schedule that you need to not attend? She says, I mean this in the nicest way possible. You suck the life out of every room. Well, like the quiet folks all go, oh, big mouths here. That's fine. But, I used to say we had a great CFO, who was just very reserved. I'm like, John, turn up the volume. And John was one of those people, oh, Hamburg's yakking, let it go, right? And the other thing she said to me was, do you understand? My wife is healthy. My son is healthy. He was coming through school. She said, do you understand? You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you have absolutely no responsibilities until I always call my wife around noon. So till 11:30 in the morning, from 5 in the morning to 11:30 in the morning, I'm a free bird, right? And she says, do you understand? People are taking care of ailing parents. People are concerned about an issue. Maybe their marriages. There's a million things going on in people's lives. She says, it's not you're a bad guy. You move so quickly and so freely that's awfully tough for someone who's saying, well, I'm supposed to move that fast. So it's exhausting. So she says, that's your speed, and you're going to have to understand others. And I bite my tongue in half about half the time. But I literally, just like the Rorschach, I'm telling you all too much. Sometimes I walk into a meeting and I write at the top of the page, BTLS, be the last to speak. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just like, don't talk, please. I try. Angela, I try.
Thank you, Justin. And we certainly know Tracy's the CEO of that family. You should listen to
there you go.
Your wife. Nico, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you've got a nice question that dovetails what Rich was just talking about, I think. Nico,
she's going to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. That's okay. Yep. Go ahead, Nico. Good.
Okay. Rich, thank you for your energy through Zoom. I'm getting excited just listening to you. Curious at this stage of your career, what your why is and what keeps you going. It may be a bit of a generic question, but I would love to know, because just feeling your energy today has been great, and would love to hear what your why is.
Well, I'm not real religious, but I think whoever gives away gifts, I got a lot of them. And so my goal in life is to get the gifts that were given to me out and in service to the community. I love what I'm doing. There's a sense of purpose that I had a ball in commercial media. When this job opened, I thought that's where I want to spend the rest of my career. And so I get a lot of great opportunities. I'm grateful for the job. And so it builds energy. And, but in the end, most of the people in this call, I would bet you've done pretty well, or you wouldn't be in this group. You've said, I'm a leader. At some level, it's like when I did Leadership Detroit all those years ago, the woman who was running it said, we're going to turn you into leaders. We're going to change your life. There is that thing of saying, I'm a leader, and I have gifts, and how do I play those out? I will tell you, poor Angela, I'm leaning all over. I think if you match that, I really think a lot about integrity, especially in this moment. The employees all know where I park, what time I get to work. I did a whole presentation on this for Leadership Detroit. They know if I take the baseball tickets and I use the suite myself, my old job. They know if he's always going to that conference in some really cool spot. When we go to Mackinac, I've been to Mackinac 25 times. I want people to know I'm working the entire time. And so integrity is very important to me, but I'm a very, very lucky person. I don't know if the word privilege fits, but I've had a lot of gifts. My goal in life is to get the junk that's in here in service to the job I'm doing. So that gets me up early, that's for sure.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Nico. You got time, Rich, for one more quickie? Sure. We've got Justin Mongrain. If you can unmute yourself, Justin, you've got a question for Rich.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time today, Rich. My question would be, managing your career as you have throughout your life, how have you made decisions, outside of compensation to maybe move to a different job or with a different company, right? What that decision hierarchy looks like, because it's always, compensation is always a factor, but how do you make decisions?
There does come a point when you see the handwriting on the wall, or I think I dug into the business pretty well, and you just kind of project out, what's this look like in 5 years, and where do I want to be? It evolves. I look at a lot of things. So I guess I see a lot of color swatches and I go, that's the one I want. And so I thought I was interested in the U of M radio job. I always thought public television could be an opportunity. And, but the timing wasn't right. And then Steve Schramm came in as a consultant and I knew he would never leave. And so it kind of evolves over time. I do think you have to sit back, on a pretty regular basis and say, do I like it here? Is it the right fit? I knew I didn't want to do the New York thing. A guy who was in my wedding was the #2 guy at CBS Radio forever. Through like 3 different CEOs. And I'm sure Scott made a lot of money, probably a lot more than me. I didn't want to be a #2 guy. I wanted to do my thing. And so, but again, that's not everybody wants to do that. And so you got to figure it out. So just evolved over time, pretty much.
Great. Thanks, Justin. All right, I lied. Do you have time? Can we sneak in one last one?
Sure.
Maddie Wyatt. Hello to Maddie. Why don't you unmute yourself and you've got a question for Rich.
Yeah, hi, Rich. My question is, observing you through DPTV, you're very bold and have the energy that you do to lead such a wonderful team. Have you always been the way you are and true to yourself, or did you have a point in your career where you felt comfortable to be that way?
I guess it's evolved a little over time. I've always been kind of the mouthy kid. ADD medicine helps. We could talk about that if anybody wants to talk. But managing my energy has always been an issue. Ask the nuns at Holy Assumption in Roebling, New Jersey, as they suggested to my mother that perhaps I would work better in another school. So I've always had a lot of energy, but I've also had my share of anxiety. I had kind of, when I was in my 20s, I had kind of one of those moments in a meeting that I thought about for years where it's just, I panicked and sort of recovering from that. I don't know, it's trying to figure out my brain forever, but pretty much there.
Well, thanks, Maddie. And Rich, our time with you has come to an end, but you are an amazing leader. You are an amazing friend. Thanks for all you do for me personally and for the DEC. And I can't wait to have that next coffee with you. So thank you again.
Thanks, guys. It's always an honor. Thank you, Stephen. We'll talk soon. Take it easy.
Do it again sometime. Thank you. I also want to thank my team for the work on today's session.